really, if a young black girl is watching television or going to the movies, the message she gets over and over again is that only light-skinned girls with certain kinds of hair textures, certain kinds of skin tones, certain body types are preferable. They're the ones to be desired. Certainly if they're watching rap videos, you know, they get that message over and over and over again. And that wounds the spirit. That can be absolutely devastating, especially when you don't have people at home saying, you're beautiful.
This whole dynamic that we've been struggling with as African Americans in this country from 1619, most likely the first day that one of us stepped foot on these shores, has been this white-black divide, and then the light-skin, dark-skin divide within the black community. And I would argue that largely what we see today, still perpetuated in terms of the privileges associated with whiteness and light-skinnedness, is a reflection of centuries of advantages perpetuated on people with light skin in this country. So that it was an advantage, and it still is an advantage, to be white, and it's an advantage to be of lighter skin. And over time, people then assign value to those things, where light is better, dark is not as good. Unfortunately, we continue to have those feelings culturally, many of us, far too many of us, even though the advantages are no longer codified in law, but they're still there socially. I would argue they are still there socially.
Part of learning and loving ourselves is tearing down the walls of hatred that have been built up around black women and doing a re-education to love ourselves. I mean, growing up, I was dark, but I technically had good hair. And so, because I had good hair, and good hair was that it was long and I could blow dry it straight, or it was naturally curly. Too many of us, and still to this day, I've been off Howard's campus for 20 years now, and that was an issue back then in terms of light, dark, good hair versus not good hair. We've got to get beyond that. No one, I've heard so many times, oh, she's pretty for a black girl, meaning dark. What does that mean? That if one of us is dark, we're not as pretty, or we'd be prettier if we were light? It was techniques used to divide us during slavery, and we're still allowing it to divide us. And now, instead of others perpetuating it, we perpetuate it.
Well, pertaining to the light skin, dark skin thing, that's big. Like, light skin boy, if light skin is the right skin, light skin boys are played out. Dark, like, it's crazy now, because it's not as bad, I think, as it might have been before. But there's like, a lot of people do go, oh, she's pretty for a dark skin girl.
I mean, I could just recall a conversation I had a week ago where a woman in her 60s, told me that a good friend of mine was pretty, but she ended it with, for a dark girl.
I remember as a little girl, my grandmother, who was darker in skin color, but she had long, beautiful, straight black hair. And she told me that I would always do well in the world because of my skin complexion, that it would always be easy for me to find a job. And I never had any problems. I was always able to mix well in both circles, and I probably found more difficulty sometimes to mix in predominantly black circles more so than I did in white circles.
And I have to say that growing up in an all-white environment, it doesn't matter how light you are, you're not white. So I always thought of myself as brown-skinned, ironically, until I came down to the United States, and that was my first time living in a majority black environment. And that was one of the things I loved about Brooklyn. I didn't stand out. I didn't stand out in any kind of way. And I was often read as Latina. And I don't have a problem with that at all, because I think people look at me and see a mixed-race woman of African descent. I think that's pretty apparent. I identify as black, but obviously I'm mixed race. But I really wanted to have a dark-skinned character at the center of my book, because one of the things I try to do as a black feminist writer is to move people from the margins to the center. And I feel like dark-skinned girls certainly aren't allowed to be at the center not of an empowering narrative.
I know people that have actually cried because, oh, I'm not light skinned.
And when I hear 12 and 13 and 14-year-old girls still talking about, oh, she's pretty, or he likes her because she's light skinned and she's light skinned and she has long hair, or, you know, or even boys saying she's a little bit too dark for me, or I don't dig dark girls, or, you know, these myths about light-skinned girls sexually versus dark-skinned girls sexually, and just all of these different myths that are out there, unfortunately, is going to continue to permeate until people discover where they come from and who they are. And my own personal journey includes that.